All right, hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna have a bit more of a discussion-based video and we're gonna go over the basics on how to retire. So if you've been following along, I'm sure it's been clear that there's so many statistics that say that most Americans are not financially literate. A lot of people don't know how to invest their money. They don't know how to plan for retirement and they don't know how to actually retire once they get to that point. This leads to a lot of people getting to retirement age, not having enough saved up, not having enough invested. So like I said, just wanted to have a discussion today based on my thoughts about retirement and kind of how I would go about it if I were starting out today. Cool, so if we go over to my handy dandy Microsoft Word file. All right, and before we really get into any of the steps or the specific steps on retirement, we really need to understand the concept of compound interest. And what is compound interest, right? Well, when you invest your money, right, let's say that you have $10,000 that you want to invest. Let's say you invest that for 1 year at 10%. After 1 year, you would have $11,000, right? So you earned $1,000 in interest off of your investment. This is where compound interest comes to play. Assuming that the interest rate stays the same, the next year you invest your money, are you going to make the same amount in interest? Or are you going to make less, or are you going to make more? Well, you're going to make more, and here's why. Because not only does your original $10,000 earn interest, but the $1,000 that you earned the year before is also going to earn interest. So let's click on that, and you'll see that you earned $1,100 that year. And that is the theory of compound interest. It's your interest gaining interest and having that exponentially increase over time. And this is how you're going to create wealth to ultimately someday retire. So that's why I say we need to go over that now. And I also say that because this doesn't only apply to you investing. Compound interest can also hit you the opposite way. It can hit you with debt. So if you have a debt that's charging you 10% a year, that can also compound the wrong way to hurt you. Or if you're being charged fees on a certain investment, then those percentages are being taken away from compound interest. And it's actually gonna make the fees much bigger than the small percent, like 2%, for example, that you could end up facing. So it's really important to understand the concept of compound interest, how it can help you, and why you need to get started on planning for your retirement today to take advantage of it. So we went over compound interest really quickly. We'll definitely get back into retirement investing and some of the types of accounts and options there. But like I said, just wanted to go over compound interest to get the video started. I would say the next step on getting ready for retirement is getting out of bad debt. And notice I say bad debt. So let's clarify what that is. I would say the bad debt is any consumer debt for things like consumer goods, laptops, clothes, anything you'd buy on a credit card. I would say that, consumer debt could fall under cars that are unreasonable, that you can't afford. Right? So if you go to the car lot and you buy a car that's well beyond your limit with a super high interest rate, I would say that's consumer debt that you need to get out of. Let's talk about good debt. What is good debt? And let's clarify, no debt is good, but some debt is better than others and it will actually allow you to increase your net worth faster. So what are these types of debt? In my book, there's really only two, maybe three. The first one, which is probably the most obvious one, is your mortgage. So if you have a home and you've taken out a loan or a mortgage on that house, then that is totally fine. I think that as long as it's a fairly low interest rate, so 5% or lower, I would focus on just making your regular mortgage payment on time, paying that off over the term of the loan, and focusing on other investment types of things. So mortgages do not need to be paid off immediately. What are other types of good debt? Some car debt can be fine. Again, right? No debt is good. If you own your car in cash, that's obviously better than if you have a loan out on your car. But I know that, cars can be expensive. People need to have reliable transportation, especially living in America. So I understand the need for a lot of people to drive cars and potentially take out a loan. So what are some of the guidelines that I like to follow for purchasing a car? Is I like to follow, if you follow the Money Guys, the 23-8 rule, which essentially says that you put down 20% or more on the car. You don't finance it for longer than 3 years. That way you're paying it off fairly quickly and you're not letting it hang around for too long. And don't let the monthly payment exceed 8% of your gross income. So how much you make every month, you don't want your car payment to be more than 8% of that amount. just so that you can have your income freed up to live, to invest, to prepare for retirement, etc. And the last one is student loans. And again, this one really comes down to the interest rate. I would say anything that is less than 4%, make minimum payments, pay it off on time. Don't worry about paying this off early. But if it's more than 4%, then we just talked about compound interest, and you're probably going to want to pay that off as quickly as possible. So once you go through your debts and you have, your list of bad debts that you want to pay off, if you decide you want to pay off your car early, maybe pay off some of your student loans, then you should take one of these two approaches to get out of that debt. The first one is the debt snowball, which is going to have you line up your debts from smallest to largest, make minimum payments on everything, and attack the smallest debt. And once you clear the smallest debt, you move up the list. So let's just put so debt A, we'll say is $50 with a minimum payment of $5. Debt B is $100 with a minimum monthly payment of $10. These are just hypotheticals. Debt C is $1,000 with a minimum monthly payment of $100. So to do the debt snowball, you make all of the minimum payments every month. So you're paying $115 on these 3 minimum payments right here every month. And then everything excess that you have, you'd be attacking the smallest debt. So debt A right here. Once you have that $50 paid off, you move to debt B, which is $100, and you attack it, attack it, attack it. Once you have debt P paid off, you move to debt C. You attack it, you attack it, you attack it, you pay it off, and then you're debt free. And the reasoning behind this is that it gives you a small win up front so that you get some momentum, that you get motivated, and that it inspires you to pay off your debt. The second technique to paying off debt is called the debt avalanche. And the debt avalanche is going to have you line up your debts from highest interest rate, so not your total balance, but your highest interest rate. Again, make minimum payments on everything and attack the highest interest rate debt, and then move down the list. So let's do another example here. Let's say for one, we have a $10 or $1,000 debt with 15% interest. Let's say, sorry, that was debt A. For debt B, let's say it's only $50, but it's 10% interest. Debt C, let's say it's $500 and it is 8% interest. Again, so as you can see, the total balance doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if it's 1,000 or if it's 50. We're lining this up by interest rate. And the reason we're doing that is by paying off the highest interest rate first and then moving on. This is mathematically going to result in paying the least amount in interest while we're paying off our debt. So the reason why you do the snowball over this is, again, for the psychological benefit of making progress. So if you think that you don't have a lot of willpower and you're going to need a lot of psychological help, I think the snowball is best for you. If you're a math person and you're a finance person and you don't think you'll have any problem powering through and paying off the debt, the avalanche could be a great option. But essentially, you would make minimum payments on all 3 again. And then with everything else you have, you attack the first one. Once you pay that off, you attack, you pay it off, and so on. You get the point. Cool. All right, so we've talked about debt repayment and the importance of that in planning for retirement. Again, you just want to make sure that you're in a good financial place before you start investing too much, or your debt will continue to spiral out of control and you won't ever get a firm grasp on it, and you won't allow yourself to, find progress in your life from that. So that's why I recommend kind of getting out of debt before you do any further retirement planning. All right, next, and this isn't directly related to your retirement, but you want to establish an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. And why is that? And why do I include that as part of retirement planning? Because you might be asking yourself, emergency funds are cool, but what does that have to do with my retirement? Well, once you get to the stage that you're investing, if you don't have a retirement fund set up, every time you have a hiccup in your life or you have something go wrong, you're going to end up going to your retirement savings, withdrawing from it to pay off those expenses and pay off those unexpected things that come up. So I think that emergency fund is super related to retirement because it will allow you to stay on your investing journey, not slow down your investments, and you definitely won't have to reach into your retirement investments to pay for anything, which I would highly, highly recommend not doing. You want to leave your investments alone for as long as possible and not use them. So Step 3, establish an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. Cool. And this brings us to step 4, which is invest in your retirement. And this is where a lot of people stop understanding. It's where a lot of people get frustrated. And I know that there's a lot of information out there, which is why I wanted to make this video that kind of just goes over it and really breaks it down and really just makes it simple for you. So before we do that, let's do a little exercise just to show you what you can gain from investing, right? And to, again, show you the power of compound interest and show you how that can really change your life. And it can show you how you can achieve a great retirement much easier than you probably think you can. So let's say the following example. Let's say that you have a salary of $100,000 a year and you invest 20% towards retirement every year, and we'll assume an annual interest rate of 10%. Okay, perfect. So let's go back to our investment calculator here. Starting amount is 0. Let's assuming that we are investing over 40 years. Like we said, we have an interest rate, an annual interest rate of 10%. It's going to compound annually. And since we're contributing 20% of our income, that means we would be contributing $20,000 per year. Or per month, and per month that would be roughly 1666.67, and we're contributing that at the end of each month over 40 years. We're going to assume you have no increases in salary, which is really unlikely. As you advance through your career over 40 years, you're definitely probably likely to see an increase in salary, which will have even a more added benefit to your retirement. But for the purposes of this exercise, let's just keep it safe and say that your income stays the exact same over 40 years. So when I calculate that, right, just by investing 20% of your income at $100,000 a year, you would have almost $10 million for your retirement, which is awesome. And now you're probably asking me, like I said, cool, how do I get started? How do I invest? So let's walk through that. So first, let's talk about types of investment retirement accounts. The one that you're probably most familiar with, especially if you are currently employed, is the 401k, which is essentially offered through your employer. And let's scroll down. When you enroll in a 401k, a percentage of your wage is automatically contributed. And the other great thing about a 401k is companies will often match your contributions up to a certain percent. Typically, from what I've seen, it's around 5% that they'll match, 5% of your salary. So let's say you open a 401k with your company. Let's say that you elect to contribute 15% of your salary every paycheck. Means your company will automatically deduct that from your paycheck, put it into your 401k for you. And some companies will offer a match. So let's say your company offers a 5% match on all of your contributions. It means that if you contribute at least 5% of your salary towards your 401k, your company will also contribute 5% of your salary towards your 401k. Since that caps out for the company at 5%, let's say you invest 10% of your income, your company would still only match that 5% of your salary. But this is a great perk, and especially with compound interest, this will probably turn out to be, a couple $1 million benefit if you take advantage of it over 40 years. So that's the 401k, just a type of investment account. The next is the IRA, which is an individual retirement account. And there's really two main types, which is the Roth IRA and the traditional IRA. And the only difference between the two is how the taxes work with the two. So with the Roth IRA, you pay taxes on the money you put in up front. So you would receive your paycheck, pay taxes on it as you normally would, put that in your Roth IRA and invest it. And then that money is officially tax-free, meaning that it grows tax-free. You can pull it out in 40 years tax-free. You pay no taxes on the gains of your investments. That's why people love Roth IRAs, because they can be great for minimizing the amount of taxes that you'll pay on your investments. So you might be asking me, what's the alternative then? Well, that brings us to the traditional IRA. On a traditional IRA, you actually get a tax break on the money that you put in up front, but then you have to pay income tax on whatever you take out of your IRA in retirement. So you would receive your paycheck. You'll actually probably have taxes taken out at the beginning. So your taxes will be taken out as normal. You would put money in your traditional IRA, and at the end of the year, when filing taxes, the amount you put in will actually be reduced from your taxable income, meaning that you'd pay no tax or get any tax you paid back. So you might be saying, great, I don't want to pay taxes on that money, I should do a traditional. But remember, you're going to miss out on having tax-free investments. And at least for me, if I was going to have $2 million in an IRA, I would rather pay taxes on the couple $100,000 that I put in into the beginning than pay taxes on the whole $2 million at the end, which is exactly what the Roth does. It will allow you to grow your money to a really large amount and keep it completely tax-free. Where the traditional IRA, when you retire, you pay income tax on the money you pull out. So just to summarize it and keep it super simple, on the Roth IRA, you pay taxes up front, but you don't pay taxes later. And on the traditional IRA, you do not pay taxes up front, but you do have to pay taxes later on once your money has grown. And really quick, let's just discuss IRA limits. So the Roth IRA does have income restrictions. So the Roth IRA does have income restrictions, and both IRAs have a limit on what you can contribute. I believe for this year, that was $6,500. But that'll usually increase every year to keep up with inflation. So make sure you look up the restrictions on income and make sure you look up the limits for what you can contribute into an IRA. Cool. Those are the only ones we're going to talk about now because those are definitely the most basic. And again, these are investment accounts. These are not types of investments. You cannot just open up a Roth IRA, put the money in, and hope it's going to grow. Once you put the money in, you actually have to pick investments to invest your money in. And that brings us to the next point, which is types of investment vehicles. And I would like to include the disclaimer that I am not an investment advisor. I do not provide professional investment advice for people who are retiring. I like to think that I am a personal finance coach and that I can give people good tips and insights on how to manage their money and how to make good financial decisions. However, I do not consult on investment practices. However, in this video, we will just go over a couple types of common investment vehicles. So I hope you can take this information, learn something from it, and then end up doing your own research and figure out what you want to invest your money in. A lot of this is stuff that I like to invest in, and I typically like to pick stuff with low fees, but again, make sure you do your own research and make sure to speak with the actual professional investing advisor if you have any further deeper questions on, different investing options. Types of investment vehicles. The first one that I like to invest my money in is index funds. And this is so index funds are funds that track a certain index or a certain group of stocks. So for example, an index fund could track the S&P 500, which makes up 500 of the largest US companies. It could track the tech sector. You can really find an index fund that will track any large group or category of stocks within the public stock market. So I really like index funds because it makes it so that I don't have to pick individual stocks to invest in. Most people find that they're better off if they just pick a diversified set of stocks like an index fund or in a mutual fund and just invest in that over time. And then that way, I have a lot of different stocks that I'm invested in. So that's why I really like to invest in index funds. So make sure you check these out. A lot of people like to invest in the S&P 500 because it tracks the largest companies in the American economy, which has proved to be a really good bet. That's index funds. Number two is mutual funds, which is also a fund that consists of multiple stocks. The biggest difference between index funds and mutual funds is that index funds are passive in that they automatically track a certain group of stocks like the S&P 500. So there's not actually someone going through and picking the stocks that are in the fund. It's already automatic and it just follows what's in the S&P 500. A mutual fund usually consists of an advisor that is running analysis and selecting stocks. And you may be saying, that's great, I want someone looking at it. But it's actually sometimes better just to go the automated route and go with the index funds that just track a certain index. It's actually found that like 90% of the time, index funds will outperform any active fund manager's performance just because they're staying so consistent and really just getting that long-term growth. Or mutual funds typically have a harder time keeping up with the S&P 500 over time. Just because there's someone attached to it doesn't necessarily mean it's better. And let's actually, with that said, let's talk about fees for a second. Fees can be absolutely detrimental to your investing. And so, for example, let's take a 2% fee. So let's say that your investments are charging you a 2% fee. That means that your investments so if you have $100,000 invested in a particular fund that charges a 2% fee, you'd be paying them 2% of the total amount or $2,000 every year for that investment. And you may be saying to yourself, 2% seems small, 2% doesn't seem like a big deal. That's not really going to impact me in the long run. That is absolutely wrong. And it's because of compound interest. And the way compound interest works is every percentage point you add to your return, the more compounding you're actually going to see. So let's go back to our investment calculator and I can show you the downside of having a 2% fee, for example. Let's go back to our original example. Let's say that you're making $100,000 a year. You're investing $20,000 of that per year, or 20%. So you're starting out with zero, you're investing for 40 years. Now let's say that your average rate is 10% because your fees are so small that they're basically non-existent. So you're getting your entire 10% of returns year over year. So let's calculate that. And again, remember, you'll have roughly $9.2 million for your retirement. Well, let's add in that 2% fee and move this down to 8%, right? Because if you're paying out 2% to your advisor, you're essentially cutting 2% off of your returns. So let's run this at 8%. It goes down to 5.3 million. So 9.2 to 5.3, that's almost $4 million in fees that you're paying just for someone to manage your funds that would probably be doing better if they were just in an index fund anyway. And index funds typically have super low fees. I just wanted to include fees in our discussion simply so you can watch the hell out. Fees are detrimental, so watch out for them. Advisors will try to make them seem small. Even a 1% fee is high, so just be careful. I would say you want your fees to be less than 0.5%, but like all of my fees in my index funds are less than like 0.1%. So just be really careful with fees. Make sure you're keeping an eye out for it. They are super important. The last investment vehicle that we're going to talk about is target date funds, which have you set your expected retirement date, and the investments change to reduce risk as you get closer to retirement. And they do this through managing stocks versus the amount of bonds. Now, stocks are typically seen as a little bit more risky just because they're a little bit more volatile. However, if you look at the historical performance of the S&P 500, stocks are, I think, a relatively good investment, and I wouldn't say that they're risky. But when compared to bonds, which are essentially debt repayments from companies that you're taking the bonds from, right? So companies are taking out debt and they're paying that back to you. Bonds are typically seen to be safer because they're typically given out by reliable companies that are very large and well established. Sometimes they're given out by our government. And typically bonds are seen as a much safer investment than stocks. So as people get closer to retirement age, when they don't want to risk fumbling away their retirement, or they don't want to experience a large market downturn that's going to affect their lives, they like to invest in more bonds. And the target date fund is going to do this automatically for you. So early on, it's going to consist of mostly stocks so that you can take advantage of that large compound growth. But later on, closer to retirement, it's going to shift probably about half or 40% of those stocks over to bonds. And again, that's just to manage risk. Target date retirement funds are really for people who want to just put their money in and not touch it for 40 years, which can be a great option for a lot of people. It makes it so that you don't have to manage anything. You don't have to go and manage your risk manually on your own. You're in a fund that's automatically going to do that for you over time. But if you like to be a little bit more active in the management of your retirement and in your investing, then target date funds probably are not for you, just because it's going to be very automatic. You're not going to have a lot to do if you invest in target date funds. But they're definitely a great option for beginners, or for people who don't know what they're doing, or for people who just want to have that management done for them. Cool. Okay. And that's it on types of investment vehicles. The next thing that you're going to want to take care of for retirement is housing. I think that everyone should aspire to have a paid off house when they retire. So if you have a mortgage and you have a low interest rate, I'm not saying you need to pay that mortgage off early, but you just want to make sure you're on a timeline so that when it comes to retire, you have a paid off house so that you're not having to take money from your retirement income to pay for your mortgage, right? It's very relieving. It reduces a lot of risk and a lot of stress just to have a paid off house when you retire, which is why I recommend doing it. So this is really short, but just wanted to touch on that really quickly. Cool. So let's map it all out. So let's say I did all of that. Let's say I got out of debt. Let's say I invested my money over 40 years. Let's say I have a paid off house. How do I actually retire? So let's take our scenario we've used and really walk through it. So again, let's say that we had a salary of $100,000 throughout our career. We invested for 40 years. We invested 20% of income, and we had an average of 10% in interest every year. If we go back to our retirement calculator, right, we had 9.25 million saved for retirement, which is awesome. I'm going to round it to 9.25 million there. So now that you have this huge store of money, the last thing you want to do is blow through it, which is why managing your money and managing your capital in retirement is super important. You also don't want to be so scared to spend your money that you don't do anything fun. You've worked super hard. You've saved a ton of money and you deserve to enjoy some of it. So how would I go about managing my $9.25 million in retirement if I was in this scenario? And this is going to be the 4% rule, which is really going to be the key for how much that you should take out of your investments every year to live off of. The 4% rule is based off of a study called the Trinity Study, which was done by 3 professors at Trinity University. And essentially they run a bunch of simulations and a bunch of calculations that basically said, if you have a well-diversified investment portfolio, meaning you're invested in a variety of stocks and you have a good mix of bonds and you have a properly allocated portfolio, you can withdraw 4% of your total investments every year in perpetuity, which means forever. According to the study, if you have a well-diversified portfolio, you can pull out 4% of your entire investment every single year and you will never run out of money ever. Not for your life. They didn't make any assumption on age or how long you would live. You could do this for hundreds of years, again, according to the theory of the Trinity Study. And how does this work? Well, let's say that you have, just to make things simple, $1 million invested. All right, so according to the 4% rule, you could pull out 4%, which would be $40,000. And assuming that your portfolio is properly diversified, let's say that you could expect 8% interest year over year on that investment, which means that you're earning $80,000 in interest. So do you see what I'm doing here? We have $1 million. We took out $40,000, but based on our interest for the year, we earned $80,000, which means that we actually have a net positive left over of $1,040,000, which is $1 million plus $80,000 that we earned minus the $40,000 that we took out. And that number is higher. And that's why that your portfolio can exist in perpetuity. And remember that these are based on averages. So some years the total amount of your investments might drop just based on the performance of your portfolio. But again, according to the study, they looked at the stock market over time historically, and on average, this should last forever. So let's go back up to our example on how to retire. I'm going to delete this example just so it gets out of the way. But let's say that we have our $9,250,000 saved for retirement. That means that, remember, using the 4% rule, we could withdraw 4% of that a year, which is going to be $370,000 per year, every year, forever, for your entire retirement. And that is why investing is so important, guys. Just from investing properly, we've more than 3 times our income from investing, and then by following the 4% rule once we get to retirement. This is why I'm so obsessed with investing. This is why I love it. This is why I think everyone needs to do it early on just to take advantage of compound interest. And it's truly, truly remarkable. One thing I want you to do right now is to reverse engineer how much you'll need in retirement by calculating how much you expect to need to live off of. So let's say that you want to live off of $100,000 a year in retirement. You can reverse engineer the 4% rule by timesing that amount by 25. So if you wanted to live off of $100,000 a year, multiply that by 25, and that equals 2.5 million. And that is how much you'll need to retire. So if you want $100,000 a year to live off of, you need to invest and save up to $2.5 million. Now, when you're making these calculations, make sure you keep in mind inflation. I personally have the mindset that, yes, I do want to have a baseline of where I want to be, but the higher the better. I don't necessarily want to limit my investments just because I'm on track to hitting that number. I like to go above and beyond to get that number as high as possible, just so that I can be as comfortably financially as possible and build as much wealth as I can. But really, guys, the title of the video is how to retire. The 4% rule really is how to do that. As long as you start investing young, you take advantage of compound interest, you'll be able to use the 4% rule to plan the best retirement possible and really do anything you want to do in retirement. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to leave a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you have any feedback about my analysis or about my presentation of this, again, I wanted to keep today's conversation just a little bit more discussion based and really just kind of walk through this with you guys. So I had a lot of fun and I hope you did too. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.